Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast. The P.A.S. Report provides an honest analysis on the critical issues that matter to you without the biased media filters. Here's your host, Professor Nicholas Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. I'm glad you could join me. And if you're not already a subscriber, make sure that you consider subscribing and following the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the PAS Report website, pasreport.com, and share this episode with your family and friends and on social media. We got to keep people informed on the issues that impact our great nation. And I hope you're having a good week, because this is going to be a great episode. I know I spoke about the border battle last week, but today I want to take a look at the Senate border bill, as this piece of legislation holds immense significance in the ongoing saga of the Biden administration's open border policy. You know, finally, they released the text of the bill. Remember, they said they had to keep it secret, that they couldn't release it until it was fully ready to go. But what they're really trying to do is ram through this bill. I believe they want to have a procedural vote on Wednesday, a Senate vote by Friday. Whatever happened to debate in this country? I mean, this is a 375-page bill. It's not easy to go through legislation. There has not been any testimony regarding the bill. There has not been a debate surrounding the bill. But we have to pass it. If we don't pass it, you don't care about our southern border. You don't care about Ukraine. You don't care about Israel. We have to pass it immediately. We can't debate these issues. That's the message. That is the message. The message from Senator Schumer and Senator McConnell is to shut up and vote. They are the new Pelosi's. You have to pass this bill to find out what's in it. In any event, with the release of the text, the debate surrounding its efficacy and the implications, it's now reaching a fever pitch. Okay, again, criticize the bill, you're branded as not serious about border security. If you support the bill, you're an open borders globalist. However, there are many questions that this bill actually raises that actually matter. Does this bill truly offer a viable solution to securing our nation's border? Or is it simply another exercise in political theater that does absolutely nothing to usher in meaningful change, where the border will remain open? Is this all fluff? Are we being taken for a ride? The American people getting screwed once again, basically getting the middle fingers, just like that illegal immigrant, the one that was involved in beating up the cop here in New York City, flipping off the American public, flipping off America itself when he was released from prison with no bail. And now the migrants, the illegal immigrants that beat up those cops are already on a bus going to California, never showing up to their court date. I mean, the American people are really being taken for a ride at this point. It seems that if you do the right thing in Biden's America, you're the one that gets punished. And I could tell you now that the only reason they even added the border section to the bill, it's not because they actually care about the border. It's so that we could continue to fund the war in the Ukraine, which raises questions of how serious are they when they talk about border security. We call it a Senate border bill, but it's actually a war supplemental for Ukraine. And I've started to go through this bill. Legislation is very difficult going through. They make the language as complex as possible. It's a bunch of lawyers that are writing these bills up because they don't want the American people to truly understand the bill. They don't want the American people to truly know what's in the bill. And that's part of the problem in the United States. If I had my way, every single bill would be a standalone bill. It would be 20 pages maximum, and it would have to be written at like a ninth grade level so that ordinary people could actually understand the bill. So I'm going to break down the good, the bad, the ugly. I want to examine the nuances that exist within this bill. I want to explain some of the potential ramifications. But before I get to the Senate border bill, there was a shocking turn of events that you may not have heard about. Internal White House documents have come to light that reveal efforts of the Biden administration to exert pressure on Amazon to censor books that they deemed unfavorable. Our overlords didn't like these books. They were unfavorable, and so they must be censored. They must be silenced. You are not allowed to read books that go against the government narrative. You are not allowed to read books that go against the Biden administration's messaging. Now, this should be a firestorm. This should raise serious questions about the erosion of free speech and the encroachment of government influence on all aspects of our life, including intellectual discourse and how we think. And all you have to do is look at CISA director, and I bring her up often because that's how terrifying she is to me. CISA Director Jen Easterly wants cognitive thoughts to be declared under the umbrella of critical infrastructure protection. Orwell's 1984 is here in 2024. Censorship, it looms large as the overlords, they want to destroy the principles of liberty, what made this country great. And there are far-reaching ramifications of these efforts. And as the government attempts to manipulate the minds, as government attempts to manipulate the marketplace of ideas, they are destroying the United States in the process. Not to mention that these are the same fools that equate removing pornographic materials from school libraries to book bans. They want to label concerned parents as domestic terrorists. Can anyone say projection? I'm going to get to it all when we get back from this quick break, so hang tight, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. So we have another case of the abuses of power that's going on, another case that exposes the Biden administration's disregard for the First Amendment, for the Constitution, and the White House now stands accused of orchestrating a flagrant assault on our fundamental liberties. And this time, it's not social media censorship. It's not about the FBI targeting ordinary parents and labeling them as domestic terrorists. It's not targeting traditional Catholics as domestic terrorists. It's not about the repeated abuses of violating our privacy. It's not about trying to take down a political opponent. This is the Biden administration's blatant attempt to ban books. Yes, you heard me right. They want to ban books. Congressman Jim Jordan, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, he brought to light, and it really unveils the extent that this White House is willing to go to engage in unconstitutional activity. Now, these were internal documents subpoenaed by the Judiciary Committee, and there's indications from various sources, their own emails, that suggest Amazon was being pressured by the Biden White House to censor books that express views deemed unfavorable to our overlords. See, you got to do what they want. That's what it comes down to. The revelation of these never-before-released emails, it shows a troubling picture of government overreach. Andy Slavitt, a senior Biden White House official, and he is notorious. You may have heard his name before, probably not, but you may have. He's notorious because of his previous demands on Facebook to censor content. Remember, the White House, remember what press secretary, or then press secretary, Jen Psaki said, that the Biden White House was flagging posts deemed troubling to them. Well, now we learn that they were also pressuring Amazon simultaneously. In an email dated March 2nd, 2021, Slavitt demanded answers from Amazon regarding what he perceived as propaganda and misinformation present in books sold on the platform. The White House's methods are concerning, to say the least. They ran a keyword search for controversial topics. Now, wait for it, right? Misinformation, disinformation. So looking at things like vaccines and masks and anything that was critical of the COVID response. So if they disapproved of the search results, they contacted Amazon. These people have the gall to talk about misinformation and disinformation when they are the ones who routinely lied and manipulated the American public, when they are the ones that locked the American public down, when they are the ones that forced the American public, kids, little kids, to wear masks 6, 8, 10 hours a day. Masks that did nothing. Cloth masks. They tried to force people to get a vaccine that was untested. They tried to force people. I remember in New York watching commercials of these so-called doctors. I wouldn't give my kids anything that wasn't 100% safe. Now, you can't say anything's ever 100% safe. You want to talk about misinformation, there's misinformation right there. You can't say anything's a Tylenol is not 100% safe. And yet they were pushing it. They wanted to create vaccine passports. These people are frauds. Oh, you get the vaccine, it stops the coronavirus dead in its tracks. Well, now we learn it doesn't. We learn that, young kids, they had a 0.2% or a 0.02% chance at real risk of COVID, of complications from COVID. Yet the vaccine, 2.2% chance that they're going to develop permanent heart disease? So they lie. They manipulate. And then they want to declare things as misinformation, disinformation? Get the hell out of here. And shame on Amazon. Shame on them. They initially hesitated to comply because they feared backlash and criticism, but they eventually capitulated to the pressure from the Biden administration. People in this day and age are so friggin' pathetic. Rather than stand up, show courage, and reveal the pressure the Biden administration was putting on them, they capitulated like the cowards they are. Why are so many people so cowardly? Not for nothing, but after a few emails They should have held a press conference. Amazon should have held a press conference. They should have released the emails to the American public. They should have forced the press to cover this. And they should have held our officials accountable. Call our officials out. You don't capitulate, and you don't sweep it under the rug to try and hide it. Understand the implications of this collusion between government officials and the tech giant. They're troubling, and they're part of a larger pattern to control what we can think, what we can say, what we could see, what we can hear. It's an attempt to control our overall behavior. And that's why I can say clearly that Orwell's 1984 is alive and well in 2024. People like me can only push back for so long. I keep pushing back, that's fine. But this brainwashing is real. And over the long terms, it has real consequences. It's a reminder of how our government has been ideologically weaponized to target anyone who deviates from the narrow-minded point of view espoused by those in power. And we keep on seeing the continued erosion of our fundamental rights, and it underscores the authoritarian nature of the Biden administration, but the government as a whole as well. When are people going to wake up? When are they going to stand up and say enough of this nonsense? And the hypocrisy of the Biden White House. They claim to champion democracy and freedom, right? Oh, it's about democracy and the survival of democracy. Democracy is under threat. Yet they're quick to trample on our Bill of Rights. They're quick to trample on our fundamental liberties, not given to us by the government, inherent within us, given to us by God. But when something doesn't suit their agenda, they don't care about democracy. Their interpretation of democracy is submission, submit and surrender to their will, and then you will be free. That's their version of it. You have selective enforcement of principles, and it reveals the priorities of the administration: control and suppression of dissent. But it's not just the Biden administration, it's the Democrat Party and even some within the Republican Party that have no problems with these tactics that are being used against the American people. And the projection is on full display. They accuse anyone of raising concerns about inappropriate pornographic material in school libraries. Well, they're book banners, right? So if we complain and we get a book removed from the school library shelves, we're not talking about the public library. We're not talking about Amazon. We're not talking about book retailers. We're talking about a school library where there are books that show 10, 11, and 12-year-olds engaging in sexual acts, including oral sex. So getting those removed from school libraries will get you labeled as a book banner. Yet they themselves are engaged in actual book banning by pressuring companies like Amazon to censor dissenting voices. It's the classic case of projection at its finest. Accuse others of the very behavior they themselves are guilty of. Getting a book removed from school library shelves is not book banning. Trying to force distributors from stop circulating books, that is book banning. Imagine this was the Trump White House. Imagine such blatant abuses of power. It certainly would lead to impeachment number 3. It would receive never-ending coverage from our media industrial complex. Yet under the Biden presidency, it seems to be just another day. Cycle of lawlessness and disregard for constitutional principles. The press could care less because they're nothing more than hacks. You have the media mouthpieces that serve as nothing more as an extension of the Democrat National Committee. That's what it's become. The administration continues to assault our fundamental liberties. And what's the press screaming? Oh, well, if Trump comes back to office, that's it. It's the end of democracy. It's the end of democracy as we know it. America's over. Yet here we have real examples. It's not like I'm coming at this from left field. Week in and week out, I come on this podcast and I provide you real-world examples of how government is abusing its power. I provide real-world examples of government overreach. I provide real-world examples of how we're moving towards authoritarianism. These are not things that are made up. These are facts of government abuses of what they've done, headline after headline. You look, every single week I find headlines about the FBI abusing their power, some court striking them down for something that they did, whether it's violating our right to privacy, whether it's getting records, obtaining records they're not supposed to obtain, whether it's trying to silence critics, whatever it may be. Week in and week out, there's another abuse by a federal agency that exists out there. So the examples are clear. The examples are real, but we're supposed to pretend they're not. When you see this assault going on our fundamental liberties, we have to remain vigilant, and we should hold officials accountable for their actions. Sadly, they won't be. because accountability, it's part of our past. We don't encourage accountability. We don't demand accountability anymore. Whenever bureaucrats abuse their power, they're rarely held accountable. And that's a big part of the problem. If you start holding these fools accountable, if you start firing and prosecuting these fools, it stops. And it stops almost immediately because people aren't going to want to risk it. It's the same thing with cowards, right? Cowards don't want to speak up and speak out because they're afraid. They're afraid they're going to lose their livelihood. They're afraid that it's going to impact their family. And I understand that to a degree, but you have to have courage. Well, it holds true for them too. They don't want to lose their jobs. They don't want to be able not to provide for their family. And so maybe if we actually hold people accountable, maybe things start to change. Just a thought. Now, we're going to shift gears. I want to get to the Senate border bill. So we're going to take a quick break and I'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Now, I want to talk about this Senate border bill because, again, it's truly astonishing. You know, the legislative process it's supposed to be complicated. It's supposed to be slow. That's the way Congress is supposed to work. The Founding Fathers wanted it that way. That's why they made our government slow, awkward, inefficient, and complex. They didn't want bills to be developed in secret. They wanted real debate to go on, a thorough debate, and only when there was no alternative. Only then, when the debate is fully exhausted, should Congress consider pieces of legislation. Unfortunately, in this day and age, it's not like that. Now we want to develop bills, ram them through, get them passed and signed into law without ever questioning them. Because you're not allowed to ask questions in this brave new world. Questions means that you're engaging in misinformation and disinformation. And I can't stand reading legislation. As I said at the beginning of this podcast, this is a 375-page bill. You only have a limited time to read it, but it's not easy to read a bill. First of all, the jargon can be very confusing, and it doesn't say much because it's extraordinarily vague. So you have to worry about how the regulations are going to be written up by the agencies. Okay, what's the real statutory authority that's going to be put out there? Now, as far as legislation goes, 375 pages, and then when you're reading through the bill, you'll find that it references a lot of previous laws that exist on the books. And so you have to begin to cross-reference it. So it's not really a 375-page bill. It's actually much more than that if you begin to cross-reference with previous laws and statutes that exist on the books now. And they make it as complicated as hell so that you don't know what's in this bill. Now, I'm not saying that everything is part of the border thing is bad, but let's be honest. The only reason the border is even brought up in this bill, border security is even put in this bill, is because they want to fund the war in Ukraine. So there's no will to actually do something about our border. They don't really care about our border. That's abundantly clear. If they did care about our border, Democrats and Republicans would work in public view, crafting a bill, having experts come in to testify about that bill, both the good, the bad, the unintended consequences. The American public would actually have a say through public opinion because we would have time to know what's in the bill. But they want to continue the never-ending funding, the gravy train to the military-industrial complex, and that's why they're trying to cram this through. As far as the border aspect of it goes, it does do some good things. It does change some of our asylum laws. It makes it more difficult to claim asylum here in the United States. There are more questions that are raised about whether or not you could have went to another safe country before you came to the United States. So it's not terrible. It's not all bad. There are good aspects to this. It increases border patrol. It's an admittance that we have a border crisis. It increases work visas that we need to get people up here to do work, seasonal, whether it's agriculture or in tech. So again, it's not all bad. There are some good aspects to this bill, but there's also some terrible aspects to the bill. There's also many questions that this bill raises. I mean, my first question that exists is the fact that under the Obama administration, you had Secretary of Homeland Security Jay Johnson come out and say 1,000 border encounters per day, 1,000, overwhelms the immigration system. So now, one of the things that you've heard a lot about is this idea of a 5,000 person rolling average, that if on a 7-day average, more than 5,000 people cross the border, well, then the border has to be shut down within 24 hours. Here's my problem with that. Why is it 5,000? Why is it so high? Why isn't it what Jay Johnson said? Why don't we say, well, when 1,000 people cross our border, well, the border gets shut down? Why is it 5,000? I mean, 5,000 a day is a long time. And what happens if it's at 4,998? What happens if that's the rolling average? Like, it doesn't make any sense when you actually think about it. It's some arbitrary number that's extraordinarily high. It's actually illogical when you think about it. So if 1,000 overwhelmed our system, well, what's 5,000 doing? It's destroying our system, our immigration system. So that right there tells me that this bill is not going to impact border security all that much. And then how are the numbers going to be manipulated? Remember, who's the one in charge of enforcing this? It's the Biden administration, and it's the Homeland Security Secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas, who is a pathetic weasel. So do you really trust him to provide accurate numbers? Or do you think they're going to lie and manipulate? Do you think that this is more of let's get something done? Biden could claim he's tough on the border and he could be reelected president of the United States. I wonder. Then there's the fact that the Biden administration has ignored the current laws already on the books. Now, I've gone through much of this bill, particularly the border section. There's nothing that I see that compels Biden to actually enforce this bill if it's passed and becomes law. There's nothing that compels him. Listen, presidents, chief executives have wide authority on where they're going to prioritize. What laws are they going to enforce? Which ones are they going to choose to ignore? And I'll bring it to illegal drugs, right? So marijuana may be legalized in states, but it's still not legal in the United States. It's still illegal on the federal level. And under the Supremacy Clause, Article 6 of the Supremacy Clause, federal law trumps state law. So marijuana is still illegal. Now, the last several administrations, both Republican and Democrat, have chosen that they're not going to enforce marijuana laws. Why not? Because they're not going to waste the priorities and resources on marijuana. They're going to target fentanyl, which is a much more deadly drug, which is something that is killing American children, killing American adults, destroying American families. So presidents pick and choose what laws they're going to follow. And if the president has not enforced the border laws that are already on the books, what makes us think that he's going to be enforcing this law? So is this, we're going to pass a law and that law is just going to stay on the books without being enforced? Not that it's a good law, because, again, it ties future administrations to this 5,000 number. So understand that. Doesn't matter Democrat or Republican. If a Republican wants to shut down the border, well, they have to wait till the rolling average is above 5,000. So that's another major problem. I don't trust this administration. I don't trust Democrats are going to be enforcing the law, and I have a big problem with that. Another thing that comes to mind is that it says with the rolling day average that the border must be shut down within 24 hours. Well, if it's that simple, why haven't we shut down the border already? I mean, if we could really shut down the border within 24 hours after, 5,000 a day, so that's 35,000 in a 7-day average. I mean, think about it logically. If we could shut down the border after 35,000 people have come through, why haven't we shut down the border after, 6 to 9 million people have come through under this administration? Again, it doesn't make much sense. This is part of the problem, and the vagueness of the bill illustrates that. So if we're going to look at specifics, I'm just raising the concerns and the questions I have. Maybe Senator Lankford can give me answers to these, but he's not. Okay, anytime you ask questions about this, well, apparently you don't love democracy. You want to see democracy destroyed because you're not surrendering to Ukraine. And you hate our southern border. You talk about securing the border, but you don't really want to secure it because you're not supporting this bill. You have to shut your mouth. You can't criticize it at all. That's the message that's going out there. Now, on a positive note, the bill takes a very strict stance towards single adult males coming through. Okay, adults coming through, crossing the border, it takes a tough stance towards. However, it does not take a tough stance towards family units coming through. Family units can be a father and a child, a mother and a child, a mother, father, and children. Those are family units. They're going to be able to come into the United States, and they'll be released into the United States, have ankle monitors that you can just snip off, placed on them, whatever, to make sure they show up to their court dates, which most probably won't. But my concern about this is knowing how the cartels actually operate. Well, how is this going to increase child trafficking, human trafficking into the United States? I mean, you are inviting child trafficking. If you have these cartels and they know people can't get in, so the cartels charge anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 to get an adult male up here to the United States. Well, imagine they could tell these people, well, if you give us $20,000, $25,000, we'll also provide you with a kid that you could walk across the border with too, so you gain entry to the United States. There was nothing in this bill that really showed how they are going to mitigate that. So this bill actually encourages child trafficking, which I have a big problem with. The flaws and the defects are numerous and widespread. It would be nice to have answers to these questions, but we're not allowed to ask questions. And then what about the border wall? What about the border wall? Well, it provides another 50 miles of border wall. That's it, just 50 miles. I mean, not for nothing, we could have had the border wall built years ago. Secure our border relatively quickly. And yes, would you still have illegal immigrants? Yes, you'd still have illegal immigrants. I mean, people don't understand. Yes, people will still try and get to the United States. But would it be much more difficult? Yes. Would it be a trickle? Yes. Can we focus our resources and prioritize? Yes. See, part of the problem is, while it's good that this bill does increase the number of Border Patrol agents, it's good it increases the number of judges, that could be manipulated in any administration. The next administration come in and say, all right, we're cutting the number of Border Patrol agents, or we're not filling those Border Patrol agent positions, or we can't find people to fulfill those Border Patrol agent positions. See, a border wall stays. It's a permanent structure. It may have to be repaired from time and time again, but it's a permanent structure. It doesn't matter if it's a Republican administration or a Democrat administration. You can't manipulate a border wall once it's built. So why doesn't this bill, if they truly cared about border security, why didn't they put in that we have to put the border wall throughout the southern border? Again, it just shows you that they're not really serious about securing the border. And then what about all the people that have come here in the last 3 years under the Biden administration? From 2010 to 2020, we had an average of about 350,000 people coming across our border per year. Under the Biden administration, it's 2.5 million on average coming across our border. And that's what we know of. Imagine those that we never detected, that we don't know of. And so what happens with them under this bill? Well, nothing. Nothing. This bill doesn't even tackle that. They get to stay here indefinitely, and they'll just eventually merge within society, and then there'll be calls to legalize everyone. So we're talking about MIT, Stanford study, or Yale study, estimated between 22 to 29 illegal immigrants here in the United States. And this study was done about 2019 or 2020. So now you factor in another 10 million more, we'll say. We'll 2.5 million under Biden's 4 years, and then those that illegally come in. So you're talking 32 million people. That's 10% of our country, of our population almost. So this bill doesn't tackle that. It doesn't handle that. It doesn't call for the deportation or anything like that. This bill, as of right now, I will say, is a no-go. It's a failure. It doesn't do anything for border security. It's a slap in the face to every single American. It's an insult to our intelligence. And if they really cared about border security, they would actually present a bill that does much more, that is specific, more importantly, that we could actually debate, where we could have experts come in and testify, where members of Congress can debate with each other the good and the bad within the bill. But they're not serious about it, and that's the problem. Now, I hope you found this episode informative. If you did, please leave the P.A.S. report a 5-star rating on any podcast platform that allows it. Also, take 30 seconds to write a review and share this episode with others, because people have to start being informed about what's going on. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll be back on Monday with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast.
Have a good one. Bye.
Be sure to rate, share, and subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Also, visit PASreport.com and follow us on Twitter at PAS Report.